Hi. Well, in the work that I do online, yesterday, or possibly it was the day before, I promised a video about parents and preschools and how those settings overlap with one another. I also qualified this as a bit of a rant. So you have that qualification as a preliminary warning. I do have some notes here in front of me, so I will be looking down now and again. As rants go, if I get too extemporaneous about this, I am inclined to go off the rails a bit, so I did make some notes. So what I want to do is I want to split this little talk into two sections. One in which I am speaking to people who work in early education. So in that sense, it would be teachers, curriculum developers, program developers, directors, assistant teachers, aides, specialists, anyone who works with young children in group care. Or frankly, even nannies, I guess, who may be more one-on-one or one-on-two, for example. In the other half, I speak to parents. And I want to talk about the part that we each play in what I have been observing with increasing regularity, and frankly, the parts that feel both frustrating and dismaying to me as a veteran of this field for nearly 45 years now. It is shocking and disturbing what I'm hearing on a daily basis, and I think it's time for us to talk about it. We need to talk. So one of the things I would like for you to do, if you can devote the time, or maybe you can do half and then come back, is that if you are a parent, I would like you to really listen to what I have to say to teachers. Listen deeply. And if you are a teacher or any of those other roles within early childhood education, I want you to listen deeply to what I have to say to parents about this. There is overlap. They are two different lenses. You will note throughout my talk that I'm going to use quite intentionally the word we. We as parents, we as early educators. I feel confident in doing that because I too am a parent. I was once a parent of a preschool child. I have only one child, for those of you who don't know. I was once the parent of a preschool child. I was also an early educator, a teacher, a head teacher, a director, a program developer, a curriculum developer, and then a consultant that helped centers with training, education of teachers, and program improvement. I have spent most of my working life in the field of early childhood education, so I feel it's safe to refer to us as we. We are a community of people who work with young children. I think I skipped a beat there. I was talking about parents. I feel a member of both communities. So when I speak to each community, just to clarify, I will use the word we because I feel that I belong in both places. And I want us to talk about these things. There are some things happening that just feel increasingly disturbing. Not that they are wholly different than anything that has ever been true, but of course, as with any field, you hope to see progress. So I want to start by talking to teachers or directors, program developers, family child care providers, nannies. I want to start with a very simple statement. We are the professionals. This is not babysitting. Most of you will agree with me on that. We don't like being called babysitters. We like being respected for being professionals and being educated and knowledgeable in our work with young children. I presume that. I don't think of any of us as babysitters, not that there's anything wrong with babysitters. I don't think of any of us as lacking in professionalism. My presumption, which might be my downfall in this case, is assuming that we take this work seriously. Now, of course, a really important caveat here that we cannot ignore. We know that we are not adequately paid for our work, that we are not paid in a way, in most cases, that is commensurate with training. And so it is true that for many of us, our training and education is relatively minimal, because when we get more training and education, we do hope for more compensation. And that often doesn't show up in the field of early education. So please know that if that argument, and I say argument in the best sense of the word, is surfacing in the back of your mind, I do understand. I do agree. As we say, none of us are in this for the money, because we can't be. It's a travesty that early childhood teachers are not paid what they should be paid for the critical work they are doing with children at the most rapid stages of brain development and the most sensitive periods of development of an entire lifetime. It is an undervalued and underappreciated profession. That being said, I am going to speak to you as professionals because I regard you as professionals. One of the roles of being a professional is that we are the experts. We are the people who guide parents, who teach parents, who are entrusting their children to our care with ideas about behavior, with emphasizing framing children in a positive light, with being able to be reassured that the normal, if troubling, behaviors of young children are typical and are nothing we can't handle. It's something we do every day. It's what we signed up for as professionals in this field. We know what we're doing, and those behaviors don't shake us. No parent wants to feel ever that you do not like or love their child. Leaving your child with any sort of provider, whether it is preschool, 2 hours a day, or full day childcare from 7 or 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m., the trust is the same. It is a difficult task. Many of you are parents as well, and you know what it is like to entrust your children to the care of others. We have to take that responsibility very seriously. Being a professional in this field means that we have studied, even if on our own, even if by reading a magazine, even if by belonging to a professional organization, even if by learning from other teachers, we have studied and we understand children, child development, and brain development. We must know those things in order to have appropriate expectations of the children that are in our care. What do you know about toddlers? What do you know to be true? Pause for a minute and think about that. What are toddlers' strengths? What do they do well? What do they struggle with? What do you know about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds? Not as 3 to 5-year-olds, but as 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. What do you know about the differences? What do you know about their development? How do you bring that into your work with children? How does it impact your expectations? In my view, naive as it may be, part of being a professional is knowing what the research in our field says. I take this just as seriously as I do when I go to a physician and trust that they know what the research says about disease, about the latest outbreaks of viruses, about treatments, etc. I trust that they're not simply people who went to medical school 20 years ago or 30 years ago and are still operating without having read any of the latest developments or knowing what else has been learned about disease. I trust that you want the same thing out of healthcare professionals. I expect the same thing out of early education professionals, and I hope you do too. I trust that you do too. So what does that research tell us? Sadly, most of the things that the research tells us about early childhood development and about the impact of preschool practices is, in so many cases, the opposite of what many parents are experiencing and what I am observing in an overwhelming majority of preschool settings. I find that pretty shocking, personally. I find it amazing that the research base is so strong and that the practice is contrary in so many cases. Not everywhere. Not everywhere. There are many people, many of you are doing phenomenal work, and you have nothing but praise from me, admiration for everything that you do. I have done this work and I know how hard it is. There are many of you doing absolutely amazing work, learning every day, following Facebook pages, reading magazines, getting ideas, changing schedules, setting children up for success, watching children grow and play with tremendous joy and appreciation, communicating with parents beautifully on an ongoing basis and collaborating with parents on their child's education, their child's care, and indeed sometimes even on the curriculum that's happening in the school, in addition to collaborating with parents when children are struggling with something. So what I want to do for a minute here before I move on to the parent section is talk for a minute about what the research says about early childhood education. And by early childhood education, I do not distinguish between a 2-day-a-week, 2-hour-a-day preschool and a 5-day-a-week, 9-hour-a-day childcare center. It's all early care and education. The care and education cannot be extricated from one another. Children do not learn from people who they don't believe like them. Children do not learn from people who they do not have a strong relationship with. So as with parenting, the relationship that you have with children, that we have with children, is everything. It is central. Children must feel that we like them, that we welcome them, that we care about them deeply. If we don't, we're in the wrong line of work. So what does the research say? I've got a list in front of me, so I'm going to try and pick it up so that I'm not looking down too much, okay? So one of the things that it says, pretty broadly within the field of early education, and if you belong to, I'm speaking at the moment through a US-centric lens, so fair warning to those of you in other countries, I understand that the UK system is different, the Australian system is different, the German system is different. There are different systems to early education all around the world. At the moment, I am speaking through a somewhat US-centric lens, with obviously issues that could extrapolate. So the research. One of the things that we know is that academics, meaning paper and pencil tasks, instruction, learning to write, learning to read, learning mathematics, have no place in early childhood education. I understand, I'm speaking to you as teachers here, I understand that for many of you, you are in a difficult position because you have parents coming to you expecting you to do those things with their children. I know that you're under pressure to do that. Many of you don't want to. You'd rather work in a place where the children are playing all day. But the parents are demanding it. And so your director or your administration or your system is demanding that you teach that. This is where I default once again to the standards of professionalism, When you go to a doctor and you have something wrong, or even you don't have something wrong, for the most part, you don't come in and tell doctors what you want them to do. You can certainly say what you'd like. Would you please take this? Would you please check this, etc. But you don't tell them how to do their jobs. And people do try and tell us how to do our jobs and what they want us to provide. And I understand it's an expensive, a very, very cost ineffective business. And we need parents to bring their children and we want to show them quote unquote results. I understand that. And we who are professionals know that this is not how young children learn. And it is our role to stand up for that and educate parents. Not simply by saying, no, this is a play-based center and we believe that children learn through play and they don't need writing, they don't need reading, they don't need mathematics. That's going to turn off parents pretty quickly because they're concerned about those things. We live, like it or not, in a competitive culture and people want children to succeed. People want children to excel. That's not what you need to say to them. Don't dismiss their concerns. Show them how blocks are math. I have spoken to so many parents in my consulting business who have no idea that the blocks that are on the shelves in your center or in your preschool are called unit blocks. And they are called unit blocks because they are divided into long blocks, which is a unit of 1, 2 blocks, which fit into that 1, equal that 1 if you put those 2 on top, 4 small blocks if you put those on top. This is a whole, halves and quarters. This is mathematics. It is hands-on developmentally appropriate mathematics. It is not mindless block play. It is not simply imaginative. In order to put things together and reach distances and span distances, children have to solve problems, and this is mathematics. I could give you many, many examples, but I think you know these things. You know these things. You have studied child development. You have studied early education. You know how the manipulatives in your classroom represent mathematics. You know how children sorting things by color and organizing things is both a pre-literacy and a pre-mathematics skill. Parents may not know that. They look at what children are doing and they don't see purpose to it. Maybe because they haven't had as much training in child development as you have. This is our job, to teach them that the things that they want, mathematics, reading, and writing, are happening, and they are happening in the ways they are supposed to happen for 2, 3, and 4, and 5-year-old children whose brains learn through active exploration and play. This is not news. We all know this, but it doesn't make its way so many times into early education settings. We know, as do parents, frankly, that young children have a very difficult time with transitions. Transitions are the time when most behavior problems happen. Transitions are the time when children have difficulty, when they are moving from one thing to the next, when there is empty space, or when there is some sort of feeling of being rushed, having to finish doing something and move on to something else. With that knowledge, how do we inform our practice? One of the ways we do it is that we minimize transitions. I spoke to a parent the other day whose child is in a school where every 10 to 15 minutes the children move on to something new. In that sort of setting, the teachers are, quote unquote, getting a lot done. They are getting kids through activities, they are achieving things, but the children never have time to engage in something fully and pour themselves into it and engage with it and explore it in their own way and time so that they can construct their own learning out of their materials. And it actually is a policy and a plan that exacerbates behavior problems because it increases the number of transitions, and that's when children have a hard time. So if we understand that young children, from child development, that young children have a difficult time with transitions, we don't simply demand or figure out ways, clever ways, to get them through transitions more smoothly or quickly. We minimize transitions in order to set children up for success, because that's what we want the children to experience, success. We know that children are cognitively egocentric, which means they're cognitively unable, to genuinely and fully take another person's perspective. That makes phrases like, "How would you feel if somebody did that to you?" largely irrelevant, and yet we still use that language with children. We know that because of their neurobiology, they are lacking in impulse control. With that knowledge, we know that young children will sometimes hit, that young children will sometimes kick, young children will sometimes bite, especially toddlers, occasionally older children as well. We know that they don't intend to do those things, because we always see children through the best light possible. But we know that it happens because they have immature impulse control and immature emotional regulation, and they have big feelings. And when they have big feelings, those things come out through their bodies. Young children, in particular, toddlers, are still largely motor creatures. They are driven by their motor development. So it seems perfectly appropriate. I got a note today from somebody whose child is not yet 3, whose school has a policy, say they have a no-hitting policy. It's impossible. It's impossible to have a no-hitting policy with children that you know can't help themselves from hitting. It doesn't make sense, and it does not reflect knowledge of child development. Parents, I'll get to you on that. The research says that children need and benefit from hours of outdoor play. Not 15 minutes, not 20 minutes, as much of the day as it can possibly be in all sorts of weather. We know that children can and do go out and play vigorously in all sorts of weather with the right clothes, of course, and I understand that is an obstacle sometimes, especially for families that might not be able to afford those clothes. There are ways around that. There are centers that take donations, that have a bank of snowsuits, that have a big box of sweaters. There are ways to meet those needs in ways that are not overly expensive and that don't put an undue burden on parents. We can do this. We can help kids to be outside, moving their bodies for a significant period of the day. That also will address an immense number of the behavior issues that we see. We know that development is not linear. It is an upward trajectory with a jagged sort of progression. But we know that children do grow in these skills. So we don't expect a 3-year-old to be a 5-year-old. And we don't expect a 2-year-old to be a 4-year-old. We expect that a child will be the developmental age, which may not always be the chronological age that they are. The research tells us that children do well with adults who they feel really care deeply about them. If you have, in any form of the word, antagonistic relationships with any of the children in your care, you're shooting yourself in the foot. We are professionals. We have to harness our care for children to be kind and compassionate and patient with children who are struggling. We know that children are always doing the best they can, that children aren't out to get us. They want to please adults. They want people to be happy with them. They want people to care about them. We know, in turn, that when children are giving us a hard time or giving other children a hard time, they're having a hard time. And we can bring curiosity and patience to the mix to find out what's going on for them, to help them meet the emotional and social needs that they might have, and sometimes cognitive needs that they might have, so that the behavior that they are communicating with is no longer needed, the troublesome behavior. With that in mind, we also know that all behavior is communication. None of it is random. Ever. There's no such thing. They seem to do it out of nowhere for no reason. It's not true. It's not true. There's always a reason. We may not know what it is at first, but with exceptional observation, which I hope was part of your training, with exceptional observation and with patience and with conversation, we can figure out what's going on for children. Do they typically struggle during transitions? We know it's the transitions. Do they typically get into physical scuffles with other children in the afternoon? Probably fatigue. Or at lunchtime, probably fatigue. Do they have sensory issues? Or is it difficult to have another child very, very close to them in the block area? Or do they need more personal space around them to feel calm? That's something we can observe. We can notice that, and we can help adjust those things so that children are not put in the position in which they have to lash out in order to communicate that they feel suffocated. This is a big one. There's plenty of research on this and articles galore. Expulsion and suspension have no place in early childhood education. We are there to help children. These children are supposed to have poor impulse control. They are supposed to have difficulties. That's what we're there for, to help them through those things. And we are the experts at that. Be determined about the value of play. These days, this term play-based, everybody says they're play-based. But I suspect that a lot of us don't know what play-based really is. You can't walk into a center that's purely play-based and see kids doing adult-led art projects, crafts, worksheets. That's not play. Those are adult tasks, adult-framed tasks. They have no place in a play-based center. We know about the value of play. We have got to stand up for that. This is how young children learn. And we know that. We have got to transmit that to parents, to policymakers, etc. Defend with all of your energy the importance of play. One last thing that's on my list. I told you it would be a rant. Toddlers bite. Preschoolers hit. Young children throw things. Young children struggle over sharing. Young children sometimes scream. Young children use words towards each other that many of us might call mean. Young children experiment, especially 4-year-olds, experiment with inclusion and exclusion. That's a part of their learning about how social relationships and friendships work. They're supposed to be doing that. It's not meanness. It's not bullying. It's children trying to figure out how friendships work. It's not something to stop. It's not something to fix. In any preschool that I could walk into today, anywhere in the United States, I promise you that I would hear inclusion and exclusion between children. You're not my friend. He's not our friend. You can't be my friend. You can't come to my birthday party. I'm not coming to your birthday party. I don't want to play with you. I don't like you. These are the currency of 4-year-olds, and they are trying to figure out what a friend is and how it works. This is an important part of the process. It is not something to be avoided. We know this because we understand child development. So just before I move on to the parent section, I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm seeing and the reason for me talking about this. I work with parents individually and in the large groups online. I am routinely and regularly, meaning several times a week, encountering children who are being, quote unquote, thrown out of preschool for hitting, for struggling with sharing, for struggling with routines. That's not our profession. We don't do that. We don't throw kids out of preschool. We help them learn. We help them figure those things out. We support them. And again, to those of you who are teachers, I know that staffing is often short, that the work is stressful, that the class sizes are sometimes too large. In some places in the United States, it's almost criminal, in my view, the class sizes. I know that there's a great deal of stress on you. We have got to be advocates for ourselves as professionals, with our directors, with the public, with parents, to demand that there be funding, to demand that high quality preschool that has enough people and enough resources to provide what children need is the standard, not the exception. High quality childcare should be the standard, not the exception. That is not what I'm seeing in a lot of places, even in places that many people would call very high quality. I'm seeing children shamed. I'm seeing incident reports being sent home. The kind of thing you would send when a child is in 6th grade to notify parents. Do you know what that does to parents? If you need to file incident reports, you file them in your files, because for licensing, it's a good idea to have a track of that. And if you do need, under the law or by your own choice, to notify parents of those things, there are ways to do that within a developmentally appropriate lens that assures parents that you are not concerned about these behaviors, that they're happening, and you want to let them know that they're happening. And you also want to let them know how you are supporting their child to help them deal with these difficult situations. This is not something that parents can do at home and then will transfer to school. What happens at school is your work, is our work. Young children don't work like that. A parent can't say, don't do that at school, and the child will follow through, because they don't remember and they don't have the impulse control or the pause in their thinking to think through what they know they, quote unquote, should be doing. For some of you, this will be a radical departure from what it is you do. And I understand it may feel threatening to the way you've always done things. This is what the state-of-the-art knowledge in early childhood education is. It is what parents and children deserve. Stand up for play. Stand up for your ability to help children through difficult situations. You are the experts. You are the ones who can teach parents how to respond to difficult behavior with compassion and patience and problem solving and collaboration. Show them how it's done. We know how to do this. We can be that model for parents who are struggling. Don't send home a note saying, you take care of this. It won't work anyway. Show them what it looks like to help a child succeed. Okay, my rant for teachers over. Parents. Several reminders, and I trust that you have already watched what I've said so far. One, there is this interesting thing that happens with us as parents. And I think it happens because we all, in one version or another, came through these systems. And in their developmental inappropriateness, we learned to be frightened of the authority that teachers and directors and principals, etc., held over us. And that feeling lingers, such that parents, and again, teachers, I hope you're still listening to this as well, parents feel that they must do and must believe whatever teachers tell them is true. They might believe or read, perhaps in my group or in my work, that 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds shouldn't be doing homework. But the teacher says the homework must be done, so we have to do it. Those of you who follow my work online know my stance on this. but I want to say it to you as clearly as I can. Your obligation is to your child, not to the school, and not to the teachers, and not to the administration of the school. Your obligation is to your child. If it is putting phenomenal stress on your child to do these things, your obligation is to relieve your child's stress, not to do what the teacher wants them to do. We are talking about young children here at the moment. We're not going to venture in this particular video into middle school and high school when homework is by the research a bit more applicable. You do not have to buy in to whatever teachers tell you. You can take it in as information. You can weigh it against what you know about the quality and the professionalism of the program by the standards that I just discussed with the teachers. Does your school look like all of those things? If it doesn't, the larger the grain of salt that you should be taking things with. I had a parent this week contact me, and the school had, in her words, demanded that a 3-year-old be evaluated for ADHD. A 3-year-old cannot be evaluated for ADHD, at least not ethically. The behaviors that would qualify a child for an ADHD diagnosis are developmentally typical behaviors at 3. So if a child is showing those behaviors, they don't have a disorder, they're simply 3. The fact that a teacher or a school wants that to happen reflects, and here's where I really want you to take a deep breath, parents. It does reflect a concern and a care on the school's part. They see a child who is struggling with certain tasks. For whatever reason, they have a hard time making sense of what the triggers might be and what's going on for the child. They may be missing the forest for the trees, but for whatever reason, they're not sure. They notice differences between children. I know I tell parents all the time not to compare, and I do believe that. They have their schedule, they have their routine, they have the way they do things. They have a lot of children, whereas you maybe have 1 or 2 children or 3 or 4. At home, they may have 15 or 20. The task is quite different. They may need more, quote unquote, compliance. And they notice that a child is having a difficult time with routines. That's a good thing for them to communicate to you. I would hope they would do it outside the lens of a disorder at 3 years old. But if they do feed it to you through the lens of a disorder, you can take in that information that they have given you about your child, and you can weigh it through a different lens. You do not have to accept the lens of disorder. Maybe you think it is good input, and you might like to find out if these are struggles that your child is having neurologically. Maybe they are atypical neurologically, and you'd like to find out more about that. By all means, there's nothing wrong with pursuing an evaluation. It doesn't damn a child to any particular path. It doesn't condemn them to a label, and it doesn't dictate what you choose for them. You get information, and then you get to decide what to do with that information. Again, your obligation in your primary relationship is with your child, not in pleasing or making things easier for the school. Here's a little secret for you as parents. Teachers are under a great deal of pressure from other parents, from the stress in their own lives made worse by poor salaries, etc., and the generally not so great attitude towards early educators. It's an easy job. It's babysitting. Anybody can do that. Just have to like kids. You don't need any training or education for that. When children, in many cases, this is not true everywhere, in many cases, when teachers are pushing children to do activities, to make projects, to make crafts, to send something home for Mother's Day, to copy letters. They are often doing it. Here's the big secret. And teachers, I'm sorry to be letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak. They are doing it to please parents. And in many cases, if you let teachers know that you don't care about those things, and I hope you don't, that you don't care about these things, the teachers often will be relieved, and they will not push your children so hard to do it. If you say to the teachers, it's okay with us if he doesn't do his letters, we're not worried about that. We're not worried about it. We know he's going to get there. He seems to be starting to be interested in letters at home. And, if he's interested, of course, that's great. We'd support anything that follows his interest in this way. But if he doesn't really want to do it or is really resistant, it's okay with us. We're okay with that. Don't worry about it. If you offer teachers this kind of reassurance, often those things will stop happening. They're sometimes doing them because they are afraid of disappointing you. So let them know you too can be advocates for play. I started to cover this in the teacher section, but I want to say it again to parents. There is no such thing as just playing. It's the just that's the problem. Play is children's work. Play is hard work. Play is constructing knowledge. Play is exploration of materials. Play is the way that young brains learn. I've given examples in the teacher section already, so I can give more should you wish in a follow-up or in the comments below this. Young children's brains are structured differently than those of older children. Older children have brains that are prepared to do more academic tasks, or that lean, what's the right expression? They're set up for that. Their brains are ready by 7 or thereabouts, 6 or 7, for those sorts of things. But there are corollaries of learning about reading. Children learn to love reading by people reading to them, not by having to learn to read. If they want to learn to read and they have initiated that on their own, by all means, that should be supported. This is not about, no, children must only be digging in the dirt. They must never have letters. They must never have writing. That's the furthest thing from what I mean. Those things should always be available, and there should be opportunities, but no expectations, or few expectations, and certainly no expectations that are through an adult lens. One of the things we know about early academics from the research, again, is that children can make great leaps in early childhood. And one of the things that we know is that all of those leaps disappear by age 8, meaning children are way ahead in preschool or way ahead in first grade. And by third grade, children who had none of that early instruction are at a similar level. Because, as Bev Boss, who was a wonderful early educator, if you ever want to see genuine, full-on, wild play-based learning, please go to YouTube and search for Bev Boss, B-E-V. Her last name is 1S, from Roseville Community Preschool near Sacramento in California. She is sadly no longer with us. She was an amazing early educator, and you will have seen nothing like it ever. Entirely child-led, entirely play-based. Still plenty of reading, plenty of all kinds of things, but as children approach it, as they are ready for it, as they want it. One of the things we know about early academics and about pressure to learn is that it can kill a love of learning. We know this about reading. We know that children who are instructed in reading early often do not read for pleasure later. Children who come to reading on their own, even if they do so earlier than average, tend to have a love of reading. That's what we're after, not skill. Skill they can pick up in a minute when they are significantly older. It's very, very fast when children's brains are ready for it. The reason it seems slow and methodical and labored is because we're doing it before their brains are ready to do it. Earlier is not better. Please remember that earlier is not better. Now, here's the kicker. There will be times, and I'm talking to parents here, and it's a lot of times. I would venture to guess 80% of the time. We don't have many choices about where to put our children in care. Those of us who live in big cities or in university towns or in places that are just really keyed in to education, there are many options often, although many of those options are unaffordable. So then again, we have no options. So the question is, what do I do if this stuff is happening? Because it is going to, right? You can be advocates. You can be involved. You can collaborate with teachers. You can refuse to be an adversary of teachers, even teachers that seem somewhat adversarial towards you or your children. You can take in their concerns or their complaints, and you can hear them as a desire for the same thing that you want, which is for your child to succeed. We all want the same thing. We want children to succeed. We can advocate. We can go to the administration of programs. We can educate ourselves about child development. We can, if we do have choices, ask these important questions when we are making decisions about if we have that luxury. When we are making decisions, some of us live in rural areas, there's few choices. The preschool that's there is the preschool that's there. That's what you get. These aren't, I guess there's a gradation here. I was going to say they're not disasters. Some of them are pretty close to disaster, but there are a lot of people out there in the world who want to do well by children. They want children to be successful. They care about children. They want to do things well. And you can be partners in that. You can step up. You can get involved wherever possible. You can speak to the administration. You can speak to the director. You can ask. Is there any way we could do this so that the kids could spend 10 minutes more outside? You can make suggestions. You can advocate for your child and for other children. A reminder that caring and educating are not separable. Children learn, I've said this a few times already, but I'm going to say it again. Children learn best, sometimes only learn, from people who they feel really care about them. Teaching and instruction and pressure and demands are not the way children learn, young children learn. They learn through being cared about, and the learning comes through that channel. And I hope all of you, teachers and parents alike, are hearing that message. If you feel in your child's child care center that a teacher genuinely does not like your child, and you can feel that, it is a red flag. It is a red flag, and almost all by itself can explain why your child might be struggling in that setting. Take that in for a minute. If you have a child who's struggling and your sense is that the school does not like or respect your child or your family, that alone could account for your child's behavior. Children do well when they feel cared about and seen and respected, just like adults. I think I've covered most of the other things, but I trust that you will have questions. So I invite you to leave questions below. I invite you, when my new website opens shortly at visiblechild.com, this video will be on that site. And on that site, there will be a discussion board dedicated to this video so that people can continue the conversation and ask questions. One more little dirty secret about preschool. And teachers aren't going to like this, so you might want to close your ears when I tell you this. Schools will sometimes tell you that they have to do things a certain way because of licensing, because it's the law. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding of the policy. Sometimes it's what they want to be doing, and they are using licensing or laws that they may not know well as a handy backup. Again, I sound like I'm slamming early educators. I don't think it happens all that often, but it does happen. An example, children have to lie on their mats for 2 hours. That's what it says in our licensing regulations. I actually had a conversation like this not too long ago. Children have to lie on their mats for 2 hours. That's what our licensing says. Even in the most, I'm going to go ahead and say it, in the worst licensing regulations in the United States, there is not a single one that says that children have to lie down their mats for 2 hours. It is an inappropriate expectation of young children, especially those who are not sleeping. It is not something young children can realistically be expected to do, including for the convenience of adults so that adults can take their lunch breaks, which is another issue in terms of funding and staffing, right? I do understand that needs to happen that way sometimes. There is no such thing. There are licensing regulations that stipulate that children need to have the opportunity to rest for a certain amount of time. There are stipulations that say that children must be, I just don't agree with this one, but it does exist. They must be on mats or cots for a certain amount of time. Usually that amount of time is either 20 or 30 minutes, which is a more realistic, still sometimes difficult for many children, but a much more realistic span of time for young children. So you are empowered. I am empowering you. The licensing regulations for every state in the United States are free and available online. They are difficult to sift through because they are very wordy and legalistic, but they are extensive. And you can look for yourself and find out if that is what the regulations say. Or short of that, you can call the licensing board where you are and ask them. They know what is in the licensing regulations. I understand that can feel a little scary because it feels like it's setting you up to be an adversary. I would not take that information and march in and say, you lied to me. See, it doesn't say that at all. I would say, my understanding is that the children definitely need to have an opportunity and they need to be on their mats for a little while. I totally support that. That it's really good for kids to have a rest in the middle of the day. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could work together to find a way for the kids who aren't sleeping to get up and go outside or do something in another space for a half an hour if other children are sleeping. Is that something that we could work on developing together? Is that something that would be considered? Right? It's a very different way of asking a question. It's a partnering with the school. It's not holding the licensing over their head and saying, you lied to me. It's coming equipped with information that empowers you to advocate for your child. Is it a lot? It's a lot. Yeah. The last thing is that if your child seems happy where they are, really happy, and they feel cared about and they like their teachers, the rest of it doesn't matter so much. I know I'm sort of this heated, no worksheets, no academics thing. Some children love that. Some children thrive on it. Some children feel at home in those kinds of settings. If that is your child and you have them in that setting and there is no pressure and there's no needing to make them go to school and no, No pressure. They dying to do the worksheet that came home. There are children like that. You don't have a problem. You don't have a problem. It's okay. If your child is struggling, you do have a problem. And what I am saying to all of you as parents and teachers is that we are in this together. We all want the best for the children. Teachers have skills, or you should have skills. We should have skills to help children when they are having a hard time, rather than turning them out and telling parents to deal with it or telling them that they can't be a part of the school. We have that knowledge. We have those skills. We need to use them. Parents, you need to work in partnership with schools, and you need to be attentive to what school is like for your child. And by this, I do not mean the transition into school, because I know some of you are going to say, my child cries every day when I drop them off. Does that mean it's the wrong school for them? No, it does not. Transitions are hard. Separation anxiety comes and goes throughout early childhood. It's a hard task for some children. What you care about is what is their day like once you're gone. Ask the teachers if you have good communication, and that goes both directions. You will know how their day is. If they're not struggling with behavior, if they're not struggling with the routine of the day, they're doing fine. The drop-off does not determine whether this is the right place for your child. Even if it's been a while, it comes and it goes. It's okay. It's okay. So, rant complete. I guess maybe not. This is how I am. I always think of something to add. Some schools will recommend an evaluation, and I think I covered this a little bit earlier. Please try not to be too frightened by that. You're not obligated to it. You're not obligated to do it. That's the way I started. You are not obligated to do what a school tells you to do. There's also often very little harm in doing it. So you can find out more information. And then, as I said before, you can do with that or not do with that whatever you wish. You might be able to get extra supports for your child. You might not need extra supports for your child. You may reject the idea that your child should need extra supports. That is all within your purview. It is all within your rights. You get to decide. Please try to hear the school as wanting the best for your child. We all want the same thing. So I think that finishes up my rant on this subject for the day. I hope there has been something in here that has been useful to you, either as a teacher or as a parent. A reminder that I still do training both via Zoom and in person in some cases for child care centers, for teachers, for early educators. I do observation, program development, program improvement, and teacher education. I still do a lot of that on a freelance basis. And of course, a reminder that I do work with parents, both one-on-one and in small groups and in large groups online, to help advocate for what your children are saying through their behavior and through their experience in early education settings, so that you can be their best advocates and their best supporters, because I know that's what you want. We all want children to succeed. We all want children to be happy. We want them to love learning. We're all on the same team. So I think that's indeed now, I think, is the end of my rant for today. And please leave comments below and questions. If you don't have choices, then you don't have choices. I know that's deep. If you don't have choices, you make the best of what you have, and you continue to advocate, and you provide children, if you can, what is not provided there at home. If the one center in your area is highly academic and your child goes there for 3 hours during the day, let them run in the woods all afternoon. It'll all balance out. I said it was the end of my rant and then I kept going. That's how I am. I'm going to close here. I look forward to your comments and questions. And when the website launches, I look forward to the discussion forum that will take place about this video. There will be one for every video that I post there. So there will be a way to continue these conversations via membership in the website the website community that is currently being set up, which should be launching quite soon. And by quite soon, I mean within the next couple of weeks, by early January of 2023. Be well, take heart, advocate for your children, whether you are a teacher or whether you are a parent. Remember, they are very young. Keep your expectations low and developmentally appropriate, and come to them with compassion, respect, kindness, patience, and support. See you next time.